I talk about health and fitness a lot today because a lot of times people think those are the same thing, which not necessarily. You can get a body you want and feel terrible, and vice versa. You can feel okay and not have the body you want, but what we really want is to have health and fitness.
Hey guys, today our guest is Dr. Kevin Stock. Kevin is a dentist who is on a lifelong mission to discover what brings out the highest levels of health and fitness. In that path, Kevin found that a meat-based diet helps fulfill his mission. Dr. Kevin is also the inventor of a patented anti-snoring device called NED, which uses our own breath to silence snoring. Besides that, Kevin regularly takes yearly challenges to push past his limits of learning. I'm very, very happy to invite Dr. Kevin Stock to the show. Thanks, Kevin, for coming to the show.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah. Kevin, before we go into the interview questions, can you share where can people connect with you?
Yeah, so I have a website, kevinstock.io. I run the site Meat Health, and it's at meat.health. And I'm on all the social media platforms as well. My handle, most of the places, is kevinstock12.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Kevin,
Sure
my
thing.
first question is meat healthy for our dental health?
Meat is very healthy for dental health. So what is not healthy for dental health is excess carbohydrates and especially simple sugars, which lead to decay. But someone that's healthy, someone's eating a meat-based diet that's getting all the proper fat-soluble vitamins and such, it actually builds like a strength within the teeth and the immune system to prevent decay. So yeah, from an oral health perspective, a meat-based diet is absolutely one of the best diets you can be on for oral health.
Thank you, Kevin. Kevin, many people believe that protein restriction increases their longevity. That's why they restrict the protein. What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, so it is. So first of all, most of this theory, protein restriction to increase longevity, comes from mice studies. So most of the research, so what we do is we take a mouse that has a wildly different metabolism than humans, restrict them from protein. We see some increased longevity in mice. This Now this research is extrapolated to humans to try and predict that maybe protein restriction will aid in longevity. The first thing, like really the strongest counter argument to this is, first of all, the science is just woefully lacking. So it is just a hypothesis. But what we do know is that the longer someone can maintain muscle mass and strength into age, that directly correlates with longevity. So if you're restricting protein, especially as you age, you're going to be far more prone to muscle loss, far more prone to something called sarcopenia, which is like muscle atrophy as you age, which is directly correlated with decreased longevity. So there's a lot of nuance here in discussions on longevity. There's a lot that goes into longevity. Diet's has a huge role in it, but there's also lots of other things as well. But the fact protein restriction to aid in longevity, I don't buy it one bit. Perhaps in some mice and certain other species that have wildly different metabolisms, perhaps it can aid in that. But for humans, I'm not convinced in the least. If anything, the reverse. More protein, more longevity.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much, Kevin. Kevin, can we reverse a cavity with diet in its early stages?
So when it comes to cavities, there's a few things we got to think about. So if you think of a tooth as like an apple, okay? So the apple has a skin, and we can equate that to the enamel of the tooth. Okay, now the enamel is a little bit thicker than the skin of an apple, but uh, underneath the skin of an apple is kind of the meat of the apple. Well, that's called dentin in a tooth. Now, your enamel, hardest substance in your body. Okay, so if you have a cavity that's just into the enamel, which means it's kind of just getting started, you can reverse that with diet. Okay, with the right diet, right oral care, etc. Once that cavity gets into the dentin, as a trained dentist, the ability to reverse that starts to greatly diminish. And so then you have to start getting, treatment. So you have to fill the cavity, basically drill the cavity out and fill it with the material. so the tooth can regain its strength. So that's kind of how we think about cavities. So if you catch them early catch them early, proper diet and care, you can reverse them. But once it's gone too far, you got to do something.
Thank you, Kevin. Kevin, some health experts say that meat is acidic and it leaches calcium from bones. What do you say about that?
Well, we could go a lot into that. So first of all, bones are mostly protein. Okay, so there's a few things we have to consider, and muscle mass is another thing. Uh, Besides the short answer of people that eat lots of protein, maintain muscle mass, much more likely to have stronger bones, much less likely to have osteoporosis and things like that. But then we'll start talking about, we can talk about things like calcium, and high protein diets increase calcium absorption, things like that. So it's a nuanced discussion, and we can go into as much detail as you want. But in general, this idea that meat is acidic and it's going to, lower the pH in your blood, which is just totally not what's going to happen, because the body regulates blood pH very carefully, very closely. It's just unfounded. So it's more of like, it goes back to the similar thing with longevity. People create a proposed mechanism by how something might work. And although you can propose a mechanism, say, okay, that's a theory, what does it work in reality? And so, the meat is acidic and it's going to leach calcium out of your bones is not one of those things that is grounded in reality.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. And Kevin, what is your opinion on alkaline diets? Like people literally are thinking that they can make their body alkaline.
Yeah, it's I don't want to I don't know, I don't want to call it just a sham, but it is kind of a sham. So for example, your stomach has an extremely low pH, okay? It's very acidic. And that is super important to have a very acidic stomach to properly digest food. And so let's just use a funny example. So if you're eating lots of baking soda, for example, or you're having super alkaline water, or you're doing these things to try and alkalize your body, well, you're dumping that into an acidic stomach. And what you don't want to do is increase the pH of your stomach, and that's going to, hurt digestion, which has serious downstream effects if you don't properly digest your food in the stomach in the first stage. And so it's like where people try to manipulate things without kind of seeing the big picture. And so kind of a short story is the body's going to regulate your blood pH very closely, and trying to manipulate that by eating alkaline foods or whatnot is not going to do anything to get after whatever someone's trying to actually achieve by eating an alkaline diet. So normally if someone would ask me that, I'm like, well, what are you trying to achieve? What's wrong? And then we can peel back the layers of the onion to figure out, what's the right approach. But focusing on trying to alkalize the body, not grounded in any kind of real science.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. And often they
Sure.
say that the alkalinity change in saliva and urine because they only change, but not our system, right?
Right.
Yeah. So thank you, Kevin. Kevin, my next question is something that eating meat slows down their brain. What do you say about that?
Eating meat slows down the brain. I wonder, like, it's interesting. So I what brought me to eating only meat back in 2017 was I was overweight as a child, and I spent 20 years and studied chemistry and biology, and went to dental school. And I funneled all these sciences through how can I improve body composition. And after 20 years of research and experiment and doing this and that, I figured it out. I got the body I wanted. I did physique competitions and did quite well. And I thought I'd like crack the code to health and fitness. And in one sense, I did. I knew how to create the body I wanted. I did it for myself, and I was helping other people do it as well. But after 20 years, I realized like my brain wasn't working like it should. I didn't have the energy I wanted. I didn't have the vitality and the life that I wanted. And so that's what brought me into eating only meat. Was I looked at my diet and I was like, well, what is my diet? And it was mostly a lot of these filler vegetables and lean meats. And I was like, well, I'd studied a lot about anti-nutrients in plants, et cetera. So I started eliminating the plants from my diet, and for the first time started eating red meat in any significant quantity. And that's when my brain turned on. And, fast forward, another 4 or 5 years now, I have found this is the diet to turn the brain on. It's the diet to be able to get and keep the body composition that you love while also feeling great. So I know it's kind of a roundabout answer to meat slowing down the brain, but in my experience, it's the exact opposite. And yeah, so I know a lot of people also like go to a ketogenic diet for that reason. You have enhanced, kind of brain function when you're in these more ketogenic ratios and you have more of a fat-based metabolism and aren't relying on sugars to keep you going all the time. You have more of this level, flat blood sugar, for example. So you have stable energy and you can go all day, which is what I was really important to me because I wanted to get things done. Like we were talking about before we started the recording, like one of my missions in life is really just to like get the most out of life and the most out of myself and the most out of my potential. And getting a body that I wanted was part of that, but I also needed the other part. So I talk about health and fitness a lot today because a lot of times people think those are the same thing, which not necessarily. You can get a body you want and feel terrible, and vice versa. You can feel okay and not have the body you want, but what we really want is to have health and fitness. And the way that I'm convinced that if you want these two things, a meat-based diet is the solution that's going to get you there.
Thank you, Kevin, for clearly explaining it. Yeah, Kevin,
Yeah, sure.
Kevin, many people are crazy about seeds. Should we eat seeds in the first place?
So I spent the last over a year and a half creating a program, and this program which teaches all basically how to do a meat-based diet, et cetera, et cetera. But we talk about a plant pyramid. So a primary pyramid, which is the animal pyramid, the plant pyramid, which is the secondary pyramid, and at the bottom of the plant pyramid, there's 4 rungs on the plant pyramid, and so the very top rung where you don't want to be eating at all is these really super processed plant-based foods, things like high fructose corn syrup foods, baked goods, vegetable oils, those kinds of things, multi-ingredients. You can't even recognize that it is a plant-based food. A lot of these foods we eat, like a donut, you look at the ingredients and try to figure out what it is, and you're like, oh, this is actually a plant-based food. So that's the top of the pyramid. You want to minimize that. That's not even real food. But just underneath that rung is seeds, okay? And seeds include things, grains, nuts, beans. These are seeds of plants, okay? And seeds are, on the top of that plant pyramid, meaning things you really don't want to eat or you want to avoid. And the reason is, plants have seeds, and these seeds turn into new plants, right? It's the reproduction life cycle of a plant. And a plant, just like an animal and just like humans, like we want to reproduce. We want our offspring to survive and be able to reproduce and continue the species. And plants have a similar agenda. And so these plants, they don't make seeds for human health. They make these seeds to reproduce and whatnot. So what plants do they don't have legs. They can't go run away from an animal that's trying to eat them. They don't have, teeth and claws to fight back. But what they do have is chemical means to deter predators from eating them. Okay, so this is when we talk about phytotoxins and anti-nutrients. It's these chemicals in plants which tend to be very concentrated in the seeds of plants to protect those babies, can really cause harm to human health. And so most seeds I recommend, avoiding or making up a very small portion of the diet because they are laced with these phytotoxins and anti-nutrients that aren't healthy. So a lot of times eating the seeds are better than eating the stuff you can't even identify as a plant. But they're on the next rung of things that, I recommend, very much limiting or avoiding.
Yes, Kevin. In India, especially, many people are so crazy about seeds that early morning when they wake up, they eat seeds, like they drink seeds. So
Yeah, it's important to note. So one of the reasons why I believe that's probably true is protein is critically important for humans. And we can talk about why. But if you're not eating a lot of meat, well, where are you going to get the protein? Okay. And so in plant-based foods, the protein source is mostly contained in the seeds. Okay. And it's the nutrients in those seeds are intended for the baby plant to be able to grow and such. However, like I mentioned, that protein is protected by anti-nutrients and phytotoxins to deter predators from eating them. But when it comes to eating a plant-based diet, if you are eating a plant-based diet, you're still a human and you still need protein. You have protein requirements you have to absolutely hit, or your health is going to severely suffer, and it can even be fatal. Okay, so protein is a non-negotiable. And so if you're not eating a lot of meat and you're really focusing on plants, you have to eat seeds. You have to eat these anti-nutrients and these phytotoxins in order to get that protein. Because a lot of other parts of the plants, whether it's the leaves, the stems, like, okay, so leaves like, spinach and whatnot. There's all kinds of plant leaves we eat in our salads. Not a lot of protein in that. In the stems of plants, not a lot of protein. The roots of plants have some roots have a little bit more protein than others, but not a lot. The fruits of the plants, not a lot of protein. The only place you're finding any kind of significant amount is in the seeds, and those come with consequences. Various kind of anti-nutrients and phytotoxins.
Yes, Kevin, thank you. Kevin, do humans need a lot of vitamin C?
So vitamin C requirements is going to depend. So a lot of the answers, it's always like, it depends, right? So if you're not eating carbohydrates and you're eating just meat, your vitamin C requirements are significantly less than if you're eating lots of carbohydrates. And that's true for lots of different nutrients, where you eat something which is then going to increase the requirement of a different nutrient, another nutrient. And so the body balances this very, in very sophisticated ways. And one good example, there's a million examples, but vitamin C, you bring up one good one. So glucose, which is the simplest form of a sugar molecule, looks very similar to vitamin C actually, and they use the same kind of transporters into cells. So if you eat a lot of sugar, vitamin C is not going to it's going to block out vitamin C, so to speak. Okay. But if you're not eating a lot of sugar and you have a little bit of vitamin C, the body can uptake that vitamin C very easily. And there's lots of nutrients, like I said, where depending on what your diet is, depends on how much you need of various nutrients. Like vitamin E is a good example. If you're eating a lot of polyunsaturated fats, which are basically fats in a lot of, plant-based foods, you have a much higher requirement for vitamin E, which is going to help deal with the oxidation of those fats. Okay, very important. But if you're not eating a lot of polyunsaturated fats, your vitamin E requirements are less. And so there's a lot of these things where it's like, okay, the nutrient requirements vary based on the context of the diet and the lifestyle and things like that.
Yes, Kevin, maybe that's why they are adding vitamin E to vegetable oils.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Kevin, you always do yearly challenges, right? What made you to do that?
I did.
And what is this year's challenge?
Yeah, so I've always New Year's resolutions get kind of a bad rap because I think like over 90% of people give up on them on the first month or something like that. But I like to always be challenging myself to either learn something new or improve something new every single year. And a yearly challenge is a way to kind of hone in on a focus. So I guess I should zoom out a little bit. Like I have this picture of kind of like an ideal life that I would want to live and things I want to be able to do and things like that. And I want to make sure I'm always making steps towards that vision. And yearly challenges are a way where I can look at that vision and then be like, okay, what can I do this year? Really focus on to help get me a step closer to that. And so these challenges have been all different kinds of things throughout the years. And so, for example, in 2019, it was learn how to draw. I have no artistic ability. 2020 was learn how to make music, which was, a very hard challenge for me. This year is more business and entrepreneurship focused and more focused. So basically behind this one is, if someone was to like audit my life and look at everything, like I've never done anything for money basically in the past. And I've lived very, very modestly. Even though I'm a dentist in a great country and money should never be an issue for me, I've never focused on it. If I've ever made any money, I've usually, put it into a passion project like instantly and to a creative endeavor like Ned that you mentioned, the nasal device and things like that. But this year I wanted to really kind of get my financial life in order, as well as learn the business skills and entrepreneurship skills in order to be able to, I feel like in order to make the biggest impact and benefit to the world, business is one of the most powerful ways you can do that. And so that's kind of my goal this year, was really to wrap up that whole, financial freedom, business, entrepreneurship, and being able to make a bigger impact, kind of all wrapped into a yearly challenge. And so that challenge is associated with taking two of the businesses that I've worked on, Meat Health and Ned. So Meat Health is basically, it started off just online education, and I never even intended it for it to be a business. I just shared my research and my writing in Meat Health, and I created that into a program called Meat Health Academy. So that's one business. And the other business is the nasal device, the anti-snoring nasal device, because I'm a dentist. And I specialized in this niche area of dentistry, of sleep dentistry. And long story short, I knew something needed to be created, which eventually turned into this Ned device, which is an anti-snoring nasal device. And so my goal is to take these two companies and do everything I can to get them to $1 million in revenue each by the end of the year. I'm a long way through that. I have a long way to go. But I still got 6 months, so we'll see. But it's a challenge that's going to 100% push me out of my comfort zone, and even the effort going towards it and forces me to learn and grow and things like that. And so that's why I like challenges. Even if you don't always hit them, there's that saying: if you shoot for the stars, you'll land among the moon, or something like that. So it's always just a way that I can keep working on improving myself and improving my life, and hopefully as a consequence, helping improve the lives of others people as well.
Kevin, you're literally sculpting your figure from the rock. So I'm very happy.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you.
exactly. That's a good analogy.
So, Kevin, your art is spectacular. We can literally, like, I was so shocked that how could a person with no artistic background can literally paint like a super painter, like super artist. Like, how did you learn drawing? Like, what's your ideology?
Well, thank you very much. I have no artistic ability. Like anyone that knows me, I'm kind of like the math and science kind of left brain. If you've heard about left brain, right brain, I've already very much people would be like, Kevin is a left brain person, very like logical, step by step, scientific, math minded. Like the right brain is like the creative side of the brain, so to speak. It's okay. I don't really believe it's that simple, but that artistic side I had not tapped into, and it's something I wanted to explore, because what has always interested me is like the blend of the arts and sciences, because I feel like there is like a real interlap and integration between these two things. So in 2019, I wanted to learn how to draw, and I had a lot of things going on in my life, but for example, it's kind of like a good reason like why I do these challenges, because normally I'd be like, I don't have time to try and learn how to draw. But so I set the challenges. I have to practice at least 5 minutes a day, for 5 days a week. Okay, so I could take 2 days off, but that was just the challenge. And so there was no like goal to be this good or anything like that. It was just like, look, if I do 5 minutes a day, I know I could find 5 minutes a day, 5 days a week, no excuses. And so I just started drawing 5 minutes a day, and then you know the first 6 months or so, I could see a little bit of improvement here and there. And then I found this program by this guy, and after I took that program, my drawings went to the next level. And it's one of the things, like, I'm very passionate about education, but especially like online education and non-traditional education. And so I found this guy's program, and man, just it's the power of online education and finding the right program. He took the drawing to the next level, and yeah, and by the end of the year, I got a couple drawings there. I got a self portrait up there, and that's a picture of my girlfriend. But that's after only the first year. I think I practiced drawing for maybe 50 hours total that entire year, which isn't that much. Roughly an hour a week. And the second year, 2020, I continued, and maybe I did 75 hours, maybe 100 hours the whole year. But just a little bit, step by step by step, it really does compound, and you can get much better results and things further than you think you can by just taking that one small step forward every single day. And so that's what I did with drawing. Just one small step in front of the other, and kind of let the process let the results take care of themselves, and just work the process, and let the process deliver the results on its own.
Yes, Kevin, like you followed the compound effect indirectly.
Exactly. Like that's what it's all about. It's all about, I really believe in systems. And that's get back to like a left brain kind of thing. But like, if you implement the right systems in your life, the results you want will likely just be an automatic consequence of setting up the right habits and systems in your life. And so, yes, I'm very big on systems, and compound effects. Kaizen is that word. A
Guys,
small improvement every single day, and it really does compound.
thank you, Kevin, for like showing your drawings, like your recent Instagram post where you depicted your muscular back. That
Yeah,
was
yeah, I
like,
got that on the wall over here.
oh, that was like highest. Like I did, like there was so little details also in that diagram. So I thought it was a picture, but awesome, you're awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And the funny thing is, I remember in 2019, while I wanted to learn how to draw, it felt a lot like work early on. Like it's like, oh, I'm bad. I don't know what I'm doing. The drawings don't look good. And it's kind of like not something I really look forward to doing. But after 6 months and after 12 months and then after 18 months, it gets more and more fun. You start enjoying it more and more. Now I look forward to drawing. And so I enjoy the process and the result more. But it's kind of one of those things. A lot of times in life, the things that you want and you're going to love and the passions come out of things that like you didn't like and you didn't, for example, like my passion for health and fitness came out of being an overweight kid. And it's a lot of times those things that if we just struggle through some of the things that are tough, a lot of times we find the things we love the most and the things we can give back to the world the most through those trials and tribulations.
That's so profound. Thank you so much. Many people are crazy about antioxidants. So, what is your
Mm.
opinion on antioxidants? Like taking too much? Yeah, yeah, right.
Yeah, so antioxidants, uh, depending on like how much detail you want to go in here, but let's start very simplistically. One is let's talk about like animals versus plants. Okay, plants have kind of the easiest way to think about it, a certain operating system. We'll call them like they're the apples, the Macintosh, the iOS operating system. Okay, and then we have humans, and we'll say they operate with a different operating system, and we'll just say they're the Windows because I'm using Windows. Okay, so we got these two different operating systems, and a lot of times, plant antioxidants and human antioxidants are different. Okay, so we will eat a plant antioxidant and think it's going to give us a human benefit. Okay, and a lot of times what we see is we'll eat a plant antioxidant and it has to be transformed. And a lot of times what happens is the body sees this as a foreign object and it's something that it needs to deal with, not because it's because it's like a foreign invader kind of. And so the body upregulates its own human antioxidants, okay, to deal with these antioxidants. And what some research does is they like, oh, well, when you eat this plant-based food, it causes the body to increase its own antioxidants, so therefore it must be good. To me, that's a crazy line of thought, because it's like the body's fighting off something you just fed it. Like, what makes you think that that's a good response? And so the long story short is we got these different operating systems and they don't mesh well. Usually, when we take something from the plant operating system and try and put it into the human operating system, the human operating system is going to say, whoa, this is like a virus. We got to get rid of this thing. Or it's going to have to go through lots of processes to try and transform it to make it usable in the human operating system. And that process is usually very inefficient. And so, there's all kinds of like iron is a very good classic example. We eat plant-based iron, which is called non-heme iron. It's absorbed, quite poorly. But when we eat iron from animals, which is called heme iron, we absorb it extremely efficiently. And so, like we were talking about nutrients earlier, like how much vitamin C do you need? How much of this nutrient do you need? And it very much depends. One of the things it depends on is, the bioavailability of that nutrient. And when you eat that nutrient from a plant, a lot of times the availability is drastically less than if you eat that nutrient from an animal. So if you just looked at the labels, you might be like, well, you're not getting enough of that one when you eat it in animal form, but really you're absorbing it so much more effectively that you are getting enough. Whereas in the plant form, you might think you're eating, oh, it's so much nutrition, but really you're not absorbing hardly any of it. And it also comes with the downside effects as well. So things to consider when you're, eating those antioxidants, the source of them, the humans, we have our own very powerful antioxidants that we make ourselves, like glutathione. Okay. We make it endogenously, which means we don't need to eat it from anywhere else. We're going to make it all on our own as long as you provide your body the nutrition it needs. And I would argue that's meat-based nutrition.
Thank you, Kevin. Kevin, can you explain us the healthy user effect? Because many people don't know about that.
Yeah, the healthy user effect or the healthy user bias is, it's if you read nutrition research, it's something you always you have to look out for. Okay, so for example, um, in the United States and most of the world, we might say eating broccoli is good. Okay, broccoli is a health food, right? And so people that try and take care of their health are going to eat lots of broccoli. Okay. Now, these people are also probably going to prioritize their sleep. They're going to exercise. They're not going to smoke. They're not going to drink alcohol. They're not going to engage in dangerous behavior. So they're going to have all these other healthy habits as well. But just because the mainstream media says broccoli is healthy, well, then if we do studies and we're going to say, well, it looks like everyone that eats broccoli is healthier than people that don't eat broccoli. Well, it just so happens that the people that don't eat broccoli, even though they're being told it's healthy, they don't care about health. So they're also the ones that are more likely to drink lots of alcohol, smoke, do all kinds of other behavior that we do know is counter to human health. And so this bias gets mixed in the research, and there's very difficult to tease it out of and to get rid of that bias. And so it's basically saying just because this research showed some plant-based food is healthy, it's because those people engage in all these other healthy behaviors that how do you isolate what is actually moving the needle? And a lot of times we try and point to, well, it's this ingredient in plants that's giving us this health benefit when really it's not. It's one of these other or many of these other things that combined with it.
Yes, Kevin. Like there are so many confounding factors in there. People neglect.
Exactly. And when we were talking about longevity earlier, it's one of the biggest things about longevity is we want to pinpoint some kind of nutrition aspect on longevity, and nutrition plays a big role in longevity. But there are so many of these confounding factors, things that we don't like. Your social groups are hugely important when it comes to longevity. The socioeconomic status. There's so many things that play a huge role in longevity that I'm always careful to talk about nutrition's role because I believe it is very important. One of the probably up there as important as anything, but there are so many other factors that I try and not throw a healthy user bias in there, or some other kind of biasy.
Thank you, Kevin. Kevin, what is the role of autophagy in carnivore diet?
Sure. So, autophagy has been like one of these. It's been kind of the rage here in the United States, probably maybe around the world. I think fasting has really kind of caught on. And so I kind of have a different point of view on fasting than most people. Um, I think about it. So autophagy, for those that don't know, is basically like a cellular cleaning. So if you fast for 18 hours, 24 hours, whatever, the body's going to start recycling out waste. Okay. Basically, I think of it like, let's say you have your house, okay, and you got a big messy house. Well, autophagy was saying, okay, if you don't eat, that's like, okay, it gives your body time to clean up the house, okay? So my point of view is if you're eating the proper diet, a meat-based diet, in my opinion, you're not going to be making a real big mess in your house. So you don't need to really focus so much time and worrying about so much time on autophagy. You're not going to be creating the size mess you would be if you're eating like a standard American diet where you're just full of just junk. Where then I believe fasting is much more important because you do give the body time to try and like clean out, excess junk and waste. So fasting in the context of a bad diet, I think is probably a great idea. Fasting in the context of if you're already eating a good diet, I think the benefits that people get are just less. Okay, I still think fasting here and there is just fine, but it needs to be weighed against the downsides of fasting as well. And people are like, whoa, downsides to fasting. Like, well, yes, there is downsides to fasting. One is people tend to overdo things where we often think like a little bit is good, so a lot must be better. So a little bit of fasting is probably great for anyone. A lot of fasting, not necessarily good, because what it does is it puts lean body mass, muscle tissue at risk. And as much as, especially in the United States, where it's like everyone here is overweight or obese, like over 70% of people, adults, overweight or obese. And so we think fat loss is the thing we need to focus on, which is true. We do need to focus on that. But a huge component of fat loss is muscle mass, getting muscle mass and maintaining muscle mass. A lot of times, maybe you've heard the quote unquote skinny fat, Whereas someone goes on a diet and yes, they might lose fat, but they also lose a lot of their lean body mass, a lot of their muscle mass. And so they're just a smaller, fatter version of what they were. And then it's like, this isn't the body I wanted. And a big reason is that they didn't focus on that other side of the equation, the muscle mass side of the equation.
Thank you for the great perspective, Kevin. Kevin,
Sure.
what do you say to the people who says that eating low carb diets are dangerous long term?
Well, depending on what are they basing that off of? Because I mean, I don't think science supports that whatsoever. I don't think an ancestral perspective, if we think of things through, what would our ancestors have done through an evolutionary perspective, like definitely doesn't support that. Like I, I challenge people to do a thought experiment, and I know some people don't like to take a look at human evolution, whatever that, but I think like if you just ignore that branch of science, you're missing a huge opportunity. Because you know, if we study anthropology, we basically humans have been on this planet for 3 million years, give or take, whatever. Let's just call it 3 million years. Um, if we were to, be able to get in a time machine and drop us, 1 million years ago, let's just say, what would we have to eat? And people would be like, well, maybe we'd eat some of those seeds. No, we didn't cultivate crops. You wouldn't be eating very many seeds at all. And depending on the location and the weather, likely zero to very minuscule amount of seeds. So then you're like, well, what else would I be eating? And you very quickly realize if you were dropped in that time machine, especially in like the savannah in Africa, which is likely where most of human evolution took place, the answer is quite simply, you would forcibly be on a very low to no carbohydrate diet. You'd be forced to be eating animal-based foods. And so from an ancestral perspective, to me, it's like, okay, we undoubtedly evolved in a low carbohydrate environment. And so, up until all the way, if we continue this ancestral perspective, like agriculture probably started roughly around 10,000 years ago. And then really, the technological revolution with the industrial age, 300 years ago. So a lot of the foods we're eating that make up, I'll say, most people's 90+% of people's diet, for 95% maybe, are foods that were just started being eaten in any meaningful quantity in the last 10,000 years. Over half our food didn't even exist, more than 100 years ago. That perspective helps people be like, oh, it's a little bit less risky than I think. I would counter based on, we can look at the science. People worry about being in ketosis long term. It's not something I think about or even worry about is being in ketosis. I've done like strict ketogenic diets, but now I'm in ketosis some of the times. I'm probably not in ketosis some of the times. It's not something I worry about. This idea of metabolic flexibility, I think, is probably more important, where you could easily start running on fat and you can run on carbohydrates. A lot of people can't even, like, tapping their fat reserves. They're so protected, they can't even tap into that system. And so having the ability to tap into, fat-based metabolism and carbohydrate-based metabolism, I think is something humans should be able to do.
Thank you, Kevin. Kevin, now we have questions from subscribers. They are so excited to ask you. Our subscribers' first question is how to remove bad breath.
Okay, so bad breath has to do with bacteria in your mouth. Okay, so we have a microbiome. People are familiar maybe with this word. Is basically the microorganisms that we need to have a symbiotic relationship with. They're super crucial, very important for human health. And we often talk about good bacteria and bad bacteria. But really, these bacteria are more reactive to the food we're eating, the environment we're in. Okay, so a lot of times people are like, well, I'm going to eat this food to get me good bacteria, or to put good bacteria in my gut or whatnot. These bacteria are much more like reactive, and it's changing, minutes and minute. And we're talking about trillions and trillions of bacteria. So we have this microbiome in our mouth. It goes through our gut, etc. And they play important roles in basically everything. But when it comes to bad breath, it has to do a lot of times with this bacteria. And so the first thing I would look at is diet. What are you eating? Is there a source of, inflammation, like someone with periodontal disease, where bacteria is basically getting trapped in the gums and it's doing, it's producing these these smells that we perceive as halitosis or bad breath. So a lot of times it has to do with diet first and foremost. And then, I mean, there's a series of things we can look into. Like if someone has like an abscess in their mouth, again, that's bacteria. That will produce bad breath. There's a number of things, but the first thing is almost, always I'm thinking, okay, bad breath, likely bacteria. Why is the bacteria in why is it in the state that it is? Most likely it's diet. The second thing is mouth breathing. And, I created this NED device. One of the reasons is nasal breathing is super critically important. We should be nasal breathing while we sleep. We should be nasal breathing throughout most of the day. Mouth breathing, just in special times, very aggressive anaerobic activities, you need to be mouth breathing, but most of the time we need to be nasal breathing. Chronic mouth breathing is going to shift that microbiome in your mouth towards one that may lead to bad breath. So make sure they're nasal breathing, make sure their diet's right, and those two things will, go a long way.
Thank you, Kevin. Kevin, next question is how to deal with bleeding and receding gums.
So bleeding gums is basically inflammation in your gums. Okay. And the reason so we need to ask the question, why are our gums inflamed? And it comes back to diet. Okay. If you're eating the proper diet, you're probably going to have gum and oral health, and you're not going to have to, and if you're breathing through your nose, if you're doing those two things, you are likely not going to have any problems. But it is an inflammation response. And so if someone's brushing their teeth and their gums are bleeding, that's a bad sign. A lot of times, what's important to do is, depending on if someone's going to change their dietary habits or not, but let's say they're not, well, then it's really important. Flossing, I recommend flossing anyways, but flossing will at least help clean out some of the bacteria that's getting stuck in the pockets of your teeth. But it's an inflammatory response. And so my number one recommendation would be getting your diet right, meat-based diet. Watch the sugars and the carbs, and watch what you're drinking. A lot of times people drink lots of sugar, like sodas. That's horrific for your oral health. And we got to get the inflammation under control, because that's what it is. It's an inflammatory response.
Yes, Kevin. One second. Yes, Kevin. Kevin, can you also talk about the receding gums?
Oh yes, receding gums. This is kind of the same thing. So the inflammation process, if it continues on long term, so it's not just inflammation now, but it's become chronic inflammation. And if your gums are bleeding, it's chronic inflammation as well, most likely. Unless you just did, like, sometimes you floss and you snap it through and you cut your gums, that would not be chronic inflammation. But chronic inflammation look, you got a problem, it's long standing now. If that continues on, that can lead to the gums receding. Okay, so a lot of times occasionally it's from overbrushing, using a hard bristle toothbrush. So you don't want to do that. You want to use a soft bristle toothbrush, and you don't want to brush too hard. So there's kind of that fine balance. And people often ask me, like, look, if I'm eating a proper diet, and do I even need to brush? Ancestrally, we can look back at the skulls before people were really brushing their teeth, and they had great oral health if they weren't eating, if they're eating ancestral meat-based diet. So the answer is probably not. I still recommend brushing to kind of be on the safe side. So I recommend brushing twice a day, soft bristle toothbrush, and I floss once a day as well. That's just being extra safe. It's kind of like, if you eat the right diet, most things are going to go right, but I still recommend working out as well. It's kind of like, so oral hygiene is like the workout on top of the diet. And so, yeah, so both bleeding gums and receding gums, most commonly from chronic inflammation, which most commonly from diet, or if you're smoking cigarettes, that's can lead to the chronic inflammation as well. Mouth breathing can shift the microbiome to lead towards inflammatory states. So it can be many things, but the underlying issue is you have an inflammatory process. And what's causing that inflammatory process is most likely diet, but it could be one of these other things as well.
Thank you, Kevin. Kevin, can you talk about teeth whitening? Because many people here are concerned about their yellow teeth.
Yeah, so teeth will get stained from various foods. So coffee is a notorious one. Teas, I think in India, you guys drink a lot of. Do you drink a lot of black tea?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. A lot of black teas that'll stain your teeth. Red wines can stain your teeth. So basically, there's numerous ways you can whiten your teeth. Uh, it's important to know that if you do whiten your teeth and you go back to these foods, it'll likely just restain them. And so you got to kind of get rid of the offenders. But after that, there's various ways that and different kinds of chemicals that can help remove these stains. Most toothpaste brands come with these ingredients in them. So if you remove the foods and you start brushing your teeth, that'll usually do something. Sometimes you can do something a little bit more proactive. Honestly, the simplest thing is whitening strips. Okay, so whitening strips work. These various forms of peroxide that's going to help remove the stains. You could go to a dentist and get a custom fit tray, and they're going to put the bleach in the tray and whatnot. You can do that. Most people, I recommend get rid of the foods that are causing the staining. Start with the just regular brushing your teeth. If you need to go to white strips, try that because it's kind of the simple, least expensive. Then you go to dentist doing it in an office. There's other ways, like you put veneers on teeth and things like that. But various forms of peroxide is basically what they're going to use to remove stains at a more kind of advanced level. And the way you do that is, there's various ways: white strips, trays. Basically, you got to get this material to hold on your teeth for a certain period of time.
Thank you, Kevin. Kevin, can we close the teeth gaps without any braces?
Not likely. So depending on what the gap is, where it is, what caused it, there's a lot of things that go into this. But in general, if you're an adult and you have gaps in your teeth, there's no home remedy that I would recommend besides various forms of orthodontics. Okay, now there's things like Invisalign, which can be a fine option, which is not braces, but it's a form of orthodontic tooth movement. So there's different options. Like there's Invisalign option, and there's full-on braces and things like that.
Thank you, Kevin. Kevin, how to build muscle on a meat-heavy diet?
So I love this question. We could talk about this for hours, but let's just go through kind of like the big things, the things that really move the needle. The first thing is you got to be eating enough protein. If you're eating a meat-based diet, that's not a problem. You're going to be getting enough protein. Second thing is you need to give the muscle a stimulus to grow. And I think it's a very basic, simple explanation. But I think it cuts through all the noise. And so if you're training a muscle under resistance, and after you did it, and it really like kind of went to failure, if you just ask yourself, did I give that muscle a reason to grow? If you could answer yes, then it's probably going to grow. As long as you're giving enough protein and enough overall calories. So the third thing nutritionally is you need to be eating enough. And so I recommend doing this in a progressive manner. So let's just use some easy numbers. Let's say you're eating 2,000 calories right now. That's kind of like your baseline, and you're working out and then you're not getting any progress. Okay. So what we do is eat a little bit more. Okay. A little bit more protein probably. And see what you get. A little bit more protein, and progressively eat more and more over time. While you're doing that, you want to progressively overload the muscle over time. So did you give that muscle a reason to grow? There's ways to give that muscle more reasons to grow. One is the most obvious is, okay, you increase the weight of the bar over time, or you increase the resistance over time. But there's a number of ways you can do that. You can also increase the number of reps you do. You can increase you can actually decrease the amount of time you did that workout in. So it's actually called like increasing the density of the workout. So there's a lot of different stimulus that you can give the muscle to force it to grow. And what you want to do is continuously give it a stimulus to grow. And you want to make sure you're getting enough protein and enough calories. Those two things, stimulus plus the protein and calories, and you will be growing muscle.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Like it will really give clarity to the people who are beginning. So thank you so much.
Yes, for
Yeah.
sure.
So I know this question got repeated, but how to get perfect teeth? What's your answer?
Well, everyone might define perfect differently. So this is an interesting topic that I'm going to go into depth in the near future. I'm actually going to be writing on it a lot because there's this intersection of like oral health and systemic health and the bodily health. Because if we look at skulls of our ancestors and we go back 100 years, 500 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years, 100,000 years. What we'll see is they didn't have teeth crowding like we do today. Like orthodontics wouldn't have existed back then. Our teeth all came in. So we have adults, we should have 32 teeth, okay? And they should all fit in our mouth. Now, I don't know about you, but when I was 13 years old, I had my wisdom teeth taken out because they didn't fit in my mouth. That's not normal. And so what it is our jaws are not growing enough. It has to do with, I believe, a malnutrition issue. And so if we get, and this is actually like a generations thing. So if you want perfect teeth for yourself and generations to follow, it's important that nutrition plays a very significant role in this. Because if we had the size jaws that we need and the size maxilla that we need, we would have room for all our teeth to come in. They would come in mostly straight. And if we ate just a meat-based diet or meat-based towards meat only, we're not going to be eating the foods that cause decay. We're not going to be eating a lot of things that stain your teeth either. So the teeth are going to have room to fit. They're going to come in straight. They're going to be white. You're going to have great oral health. Okay. Now, some of that we don't have control over. Like my jaw now, I didn't know about a meat-based diet when I was, 6 to 12 years old, and I was eating a very bad diet, and maybe that's why I got my jaws underdeveloped. So what can I do now? Well, orthodontics is a way to straighten your teeth. We talked about the ways to whiten your teeth. And then beyond that, we've talked about, what the importance of keeping good oral health, and the ways to do that is proper diet, some oral hygiene practice, then you're gonna have perfect teeth.
Thank you, Kevin. Kevin, why doctors and nutritionists say meat is bad?
They say it's bad for a lot of different reasons. I think, well, one is, so my brother, who's a year older than me, he's an MD, a medical doctor. He's actually an ophthalmologist, so he does eye surgeries. But I can tell you, he had little to no nutrition training in medical school, and he's probably the smartest person I know. I mean, he was valedictorian of a very prestigious high school, valedictorian of Vanderbilt University. He went to Washington Medical School. He's been in the upper echelon of education the whole way, and he's been at the top of class. One of the smartest people I know. He didn't have nutrition training in medical school. Okay, so the doctors that are telling us these advice have very little nutrition experience, research, anything. So that's the first thing. We have to realize who's giving this advice. And then what seems to happen is we have some authority figure, who knows who granted that authority to them, teaching dietitians certain things, and dietitians just regurgitate the things they were taught. And so there's a lot of this, echo chambers. This is what the way they said, so I'm repeating it to this person, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's one of the issues. People just don't have the training. They don't have the expertise. They don't do the research. They don't look at things through anthropology, paleontology, morphology. There's all these sciences. And so this is what really got me into nutrition. Is I started to take a very holistic approach through lots of sciences: anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, anthropology. And when you start bridging these sciences together, you start to be able to understand, what is a human actually designed to eat? To me, that's the question. And when you figure out that question, then a lot of this health advice starts making a lot of sense. But so we have echo chambers, and then I think we do have alternative interest that sway a lot of opinion. So things from like the Kellogg's family, which was like a religious thing that really started getting people eating basically high sugar breakfast foods as health food, just criminal. We have Coca-Cola, who has had tremendous influence in research and recommendations. Coca-Cola is one of the worst things you can put in your body, but it has reached every corner of the earth. Everyone knows what Coca-Cola is, and it's one of the worst things you can eat. But they obviously have huge vested interest in that being, they have huge vested interest in sugar being just empty calories, right? That's the best narrative they can think of. It is not just empty calories, okay? It causes very much damage. So we have things from religious groups to corporations to uninformed echo chambers that just, don't have meat as an agenda. Now, of course, there's some, farmers or meat associations that obviously have a vested interest in meat, but I think their voice is a little bit quieter than a lot of the other voices that we might hear. Currently, one of the voices is green and sustainability and like lab fake meats, which, man, when you dive into the research, not only is it not greener, it's not better for the environment, it's super unhealthy, like very, very unhealthy. So, we got a lot of these false narratives, which, part of my mission is to help try and cut through that noise and help people like see truth for themselves. And at least be like, look, here's another opinion from someone that has looked broad. I look very broad. Like, one of my expertise is, while I may not go super deep, I try and go deep enough in all these sciences, anthropology, but I don't just look at anthropology. I've gone extraordinarily broad. So the way I approach learning and research in my life is, have you heard of Pareto's principle, where 20% gives you 80% of the results? Well, my goal is always, I want to find the 20% of information in all of these sciences towards human health that's going to give me 80% of the knowledge in that area. And I want to take that broad across all the sciences to create the most complete picture I possibly have. And that's what I tried to bring to the program that I created, was to bring all this science together to say, what is a human designed to eat? How do we find health? So kind of a roundabout answer, but that's why I think we get a lot of bad recommendations, why meat is bad, why meat causes cancer or diabetes, things that don't make any sense. Like meat causing diabetes is the most illogical. It doesn't make sense in science. It doesn't make sense in research or anything, but how some of these narratives get stuck and repeated in society.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Kevin, last question.
Yep.
Would you like to issue a 7-day challenge to our subscribers?
A 7-day challenge. Whew. Okay, so caveat. Sure, a 7-day challenge. I would say, look, see if you can go 7 days of eating only meat-based foods, no carbohydrates. A couple things will happen. One is, it'll bring to light the addiction of sugars and carbohydrates, because people don't realize how addicting a lot of these hyper palatable foods are. And you just ask someone to be like, go 7 days or go 30 days is usually what I'd challenge someone to give them up. And man, it's like drug seeking behavior. The addiction is real. But in 7 days, a few things will happen. And a lot of times people will feel worse because the killing of addictions, their body is like a carb-based, sugar-burning fuel that is unable to tap into its fat reserves very easily. So there's this concept of getting fat adapted, and so there's a lot of times an uncomfortable transition period to getting healthy, and so a lot of times if someone does this for 7 days, they'll start to feel that. Usually by 30 days, the worst of it's over, but usually it could take several months, depending on how long someone's eaten, of where their health situation is, to really start fully healing to the point where you're like, like you feel like a new person. So there can be a little bit of a trough of despair, is what I call it. One of the reasons I created the program is because it's hard to get through this trough for people. It's hard to get through the addiction. It's hard to figure out what to eat, how much, when, how to get the body you want, etc. So 7-day challenge would be, just try to eat meat-based foods for 7 days, and if nothing else, it'll bring to light the some of the demons you gotta battle.
Thank you, Kevin. And finally, can you share the details of your program so that people who are interested can take it?
Yeah, so the program is as simple as it sounds, as eating like just a meat-based diet. There's a lot of complexity around it. So we could take someone who, they've heard about this carnivore diet or they've heard about a meat-based diet, but there's all these fears around it. What about vitamin C? What about this? What about that? So they need more education before they dive in. Okay, so the program, that one aspect of the program is to talk about that. Then you get people that, okay, I'm convinced, I'm going to dive in, I'm going to start trying it out. And then they start hitting some of the roadblocks we were just talking about. They're not feeling good. They have all these issues, GI problems, low energy, there's a lot of things to get to the other side of that. So how do you navigate that? So that's another part of the program. How do you cross that bridge? And then there's a lot of people that make their way across that bridge. They're feeling great. They've found new health, and their body composition just isn't there yet. Well, I spent 20 years figuring out body composition. So I applied a lot of the principles that I learned during those 20 years to a meat-based diet. And there's a way you can have your meat and eat it too, meaning you can have the health and you can have the fitness. So the program covers that as well. And then kind of the last thing the program covers is, people are like, well, look, I can't just eat only meat the rest of my life. And for most people, I say you don't need to. But the program talks about what plant-based foods could you eat to make it work in your life. And people have different goals. Some, like if someone wants to be like a professional bodybuilder, I might recommend they eat some plant-based foods. Or people that have social lives and they're like, look, I want to go out and have a pizza with friends occasionally. How does that fit into this diet? How do I make this work for my life? How do I make it work for the long term? So the program talks about that. So the whole thing is it takes someone from anywhere where they are starting to anywhere to like to the finish line. And by the end of the program, they'll know everything, how to implement everything to eat in a way to get the body they want. We also go through training and things like that. But it's basically 20 plus years of research, experimentation, science put into, feasibly someone could go through it in one weekend. It's possible. There's like 15 hours, but you can listen on 2x speed, watch the videos and whatnot. But you can condense that all into a weekend so people can like literally discover health for many people for the first time. And if not for the first time, take their health to the next level.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Kevin. And thank you, Kevin, for coming to the show and helping us to become healthy. You're awesome.
Well, thank you for introducing me to the people of India. It's, congratulations on all your success. And, thank you for getting the word out there because I think, what you're doing and what I'm trying to do is very important because finding out the right foods for humans to eat, to thrive should be simple, but it's anything but today. So I think, we share a very important common mission.
Thank you so much, Kevin.
Subscribe to BNS Goku Great.